All right, so I'm here today to kind of present to you guys the web development application that I created, I guess in its best light. And in the worst case scenario, if my application for whatever reason doesn't work on the internet, at least you guys will have this. In the best case scenario, this will serve as a guide to kind of put you in the right mindset as to how I envision people using my application and the problem that it solves. So let's dive into the problem. So with this application, I wanted to address uh, an inefficiency in my own life, and build an application that would help me handle that, and then hopefully other people would find it useful the way that I find it. So what you're looking at right here is a Google spreadsheet of the way that I like to organize my time. So some different observations that you should see here is uh, a lot of events are repeated, especially the grayed out events. I view the grayed out events as commitments that I have that I can't schedule for free time. So that's my class schedule for this semester. And this is the way that I was organizing my time in March. As you can see, there's a lot of unfilled out time. I think I only actually used this for about a week until in March, until I realized that I just didn't have the time to even upkeep this. So, and the reason that is because, as you just saw, filling out this time involves a lot of copy and pasting from other sheets. So, if I don't have what I need on one sheet, I have to go get it on another sheet. I have to recopy and paste the table even with just all the times and stuff. And God forbid my schedule should ever change. I then have to make that change and then copy and paste it over onto as many weeks as I've seen out into the future. So the idea is I wanted to get the same outcome with this, where I'm able to schedule my free time um, and do it in a relatively easy, scalable way, but get rid of all of this extra overhead that comes from like switching between pages and copying and pasting different things. So the way that I wanted to solve this was through a drag and drop calendar. So say I need to go to the gym 4 times a week. If I'm in the week view of my calendar, there'll be 4 gym events to drag over onto the different days that I want to go. And I could do this for anything. Like if I want to get 8 hours of sleep, I could drag that over and make sure every day has 8 hours of sleep scheduled. If I want to do homework, I can make like a homework event, like a homework regimen that would populate a certain number of homework events per week for me to drag onto my calendar. So that was my basis point. So then when I combined the application that I wanted to create with the project specifications, this UML really started to take shape. So you'll see right at the top that there are users, and there are 3 different types of users. A user could be any combination of these roles. They could be a coach and a cadet, an admin and a coach, and they could only be one of each also. So the idea is that a user will create a regimen, and when they do that, they become a coach. But this regimen is something like go to the gym 4 days a week for the next month. So then other users can view this regimen and enlist in it, and they are the cadets. So a coach doesn't have to enlist in their own regimen, but they can. And then once they do this, the regimen will populate many events in their event bank. So up in the top right, you'll see users have many banked events. This is referring to the idea that those are those banked events, and when you drag them out of your banked events, they become scheduled events, and those are the events that appear on your calendar. Also, say I'm a user and I really like, say my name, I'm user Ray, and I really like the get 8 hours of sleep regimen that Ed has created, and I really want my friend Marcy to join. I can invite her to join that regimen, and this, and then they can see all their invitations. They can view the regimen from that view, and they can decide whether they want to join or not. So obviously, just going through the required data model, we have users. We have domain objects. We have regimen and events. We also have two types of users, coaches and cadets. We have user-to-user relationships where users can invite each other to events. We also have domain object relationship. So users can join regimens, and they can also have scheduled and banked events. Domain-to-domain regimen. Events belong to a regimen in the way that they refer to the regimen that created them. We have a few one-to-many relationships, but one that jumps out at me is that a coach can create many regimens. We also have a few many-to-many relationships. One that jumps out to me is that a user or a cadet, I should say, can be enlisted in many regimens, and a regimen can have many cadets enlisted in it. So let's dive into the application here. Here you have the landing page for the application. Primarily aesthetic. Users can kind of get an idea of what the site is all about. There are some GIFs to show the animation of some user flows. Some basic options at the top of the screen. There's a login screen. You can also register new users. But probably what is more interesting is that without being logged in, users have access to peruse through the list of regimens that exist. So they can decide whether or not they want to register or if it's worth it to be scheduling these events. Say I'm interested in cooking, I'll do a search for cooking. I see this easy cooking challenge. I know when the regimen starts and ends. So I know that it's starting April 30th, so maybe it's something that I want to join in on. There's a link to the recipes that this regimen is referring to. This regimen was created by Charlie. He talks about his cooking passion, and there we can also see that the other regimens that he is in charge of coaching and upkeeping. So let's log in as a registered user and see what we have to work with once we're actually logged in. So the landing page for a user is their calendar page. Here you can see that she has already imported a Google Calendar. That's what those black events are, and that her regimen bank is empty because she's not enlisted in anything yet. If we look at her profile, we can edit all the fields having to do with Alice. We can also edit her bio, which will basically show up on her profile page, and we have a lot of freedom there through the use of Text Angular. Also, there's some form validation, and here you'll see the Google Calendar ID that people use to import their Google Calendar. This process is not very complicated, but can be, so I included an instruction page to help users. So let's go and enlist in a regimen and see what happens. So I think we were looking at that cooking regimen earlier. Let's enlist in that. Notice that it won't start until April 30th. And it's going to happen 3 times weekly. The easy one is 1 time weekly. The medium one, starting later, is 3 times weekly. So we go into the week of April 30th, and that's when we can first see an event over on the right side of our screen getting populated by the bank. If we go even farther into when the next month, when our medium cooking challenge starts, we can see that we actually have 3 per week to place. And there's 1 week that is like part of the previous regimen, so we have an option to schedule both there. So we can simply just drag the event over and it populates onto our calendar. This will switch the user model as well. That event is no longer saved in that user model's banked regimens. It's on their scheduled regimens, so when we refresh the calendar, the event will be there. We can also update the event by clicking on it. We can change it by dragging. We have all the functionality that you'd expect a calendar application to have. So now let's sign up for a non-weekly regimen and see how our bank responds to that. So let's read 10 pages a day. It's an event that's going to happen once per day. We can look at the details of the event here. We can view the regimen coach and see what he's all about, and do we trust him? Do we want to join his regimen? Does he inspire us to read 10 pages a day? I'd say he does, so let's enlist. We can see that we are now enlisted in that regimen, and when we look at our calendar, it's not there. But that is because it is in our daily view, because it is a once per day event. This is a feature that prevents users from misscheduling their events, and it's also nice to know what you need to do that day, as opposed to being overwhelmed with seeing maybe like 30 read pages, 10 pages a day events in your monthly view of your calendar. Um, so we can also unenlist from regimens. Doing so will remove it from our list, but it will also cascade delete the events that we had scheduled. So let's look at the details of importing a Google Calendar. The Google Calendar is the public API that I decided to use for this application, and because I decided that it was imperative to the functionality of the application. As you can see in my spreadsheet version, copying those repetitive events over and over was a real pain. So Bob has already imported a Google Calendar, but let's re-import that calendar just to see the steps that he went through. So if we go back to his calendar, those events are gone. He has severed his Google API connection. So to get that ID, he is going to look at his calendar settings. That's where you can find your Google Calendar ID. To get a calendar ID that can be imported by Google Calendars, you are going to need to make your calendar public. You can do share only busy information, which is why the events before didn't have titles, because we're not privy to that information, but we just unselected that. So now when we re-import that calendar using the ID that we found down here, the calendar events will now have the event titles that were present in our actual Google Calendar. So it's very easy to import a calendar. You just paste it there. And these steps are also summarized on that info button that you just saw. And now we can see that those events have actually populated in his calendar. Now he can schedule his regimen events around them. Next, let's look at the social functionality of the application, which is sending invites. Every invite needs a user to send it to and a regimen to invite them to. So let's search for Bob there. We can search through our regimens here for the one that we want. Let's invite him to the Tough Mudder, and let's send that invitation. So now we can see in our sent invites that we've sent an invite to Bob, and we have yet to receive any invitations from anyone else. But let's see what happens if we log in as Bob. Do we receive that invitation? So if I log in as Bob, and I'm like, hey, I wonder if anybody's invited me to anything, I can see that Alice did indeed invite me to something. I can delete those invites as I wish. If I click on the row, I'll be brought to the details where I can enlist in the regimen, unenlist in the regimen. It just brings me to the details page of that regimen. So we're getting towards the end, but let's look at what the admin can do. So to demonstrate the admin's abilities without breaking any of the users that I've created for you guys to peruse through, let's create a test user. In respect of your guys' time, I kind of sped through this process a little bit, but feel free to slow it down if you want to see what's really going on. So here, if you create a test user without bio, you'll get a message that basically tells you, hey, go make a bio, otherwise this page isn't going to look good. So we're making a regimen here. Now we have our test user and our test regimen. Let's log out and log back in as admin. Actually, you know what? Admin is an admin, which we'll see, but just to show you guys that Facebook is working, I'll sign in as my Facebook user, who also happens to be an admin. So if we go to the admin tab, which is only visible for admins, you'll see there I am from Facebook, but also there is admin at A down there. So you could also sign in as the admin user to see this view, which you'll probably have to do because you won't have access to my Facebook. So we can see from the admin view a list of regimens that exist and a list of users. As you can see, we can edit this regimen even though we are not the coach of this regimen because we have admin privileges. So let's change the title a little bit. Let's change the description. Maybe me as a Facebook user is not a huge fan of testing as opposed to testy testerson, or whatever our user's name was. So let's update the details of this regimen. When we update in that regimen, it brings us to our regimen page. And me as a Facebook user, I don't have any. So let's go to the admin page. We can see that it's been changed from test more stuff to test less stuff. If we then go over to the user, we can change his information as well. We could give him a Google Calendar ID. If a user was having trouble with that import process, we could do it for them. We can also, from this list, delete users and regimens. And we also have search functionality baked into the admin view as well. So that's the gist of my application. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you very much for all of the work you've done this semester. This class has been an amazing experience, and I know that this application will increase the quality of my life just because I won't have to use those spreadsheets anymore. And feel free to use my application if you think that you'd like to use it. And thank you very much. Bye.